Welcome, everyone. Joe Tarnowski here, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation on how to win at retail with multicultural growth audiences. Our speaker today is Brian Owens, who is the SVP of Commerce Strategy at VMLY&R Commerce. And he's going to discuss the intersection of culture and commerce and how retailers and brands can drive engagement with diverse audiences by connecting them on the media, platforms, and issues that are important to them. So I'm going to stick around and add a little bit of commentary along the way. And with that, I want to hand it off to Brian to get things started. Brian,
Awesome.
thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to go to a couple slides, Joe.
Sure.
Awesome. So Joe's helping me navigate today as we have this conversation around multicultural growth audiences. This is who I am. So what I want to do today, and again, Joe set it up perfectly. Again, let me really quickly. I'm Brian Owens, Senior Vice President. I work at VMLY&R Commerce. It's a lot of letters. It's a creative commerce agency. We believe in the power of content to drive conversion. And what I'm going to talk about today is a different way for us to do category management. I've been in this space, Joe knows, for close to 20 years now, whether at P&G, Reckitt, or Gillette, selling to retailers. So I have a lot of trade strategy expertise, as well as now with working at Kantar with our research, and now with the ability to work at one of the world's largest creative commerce agencies in the world. The ability to create a full story is what I want to picture. So not only the insight will give you some inspiration as well as some activation ideas is the idea for today, all around the multicultural shopper and the growth audience associated with that at retail. So we'll jump right in, Joe, if you're ready.
Sure.
Awesome. And so where we want to start the opportunity comes from personal experience. So I think the next slide really sums it up. I wrote a piece last year. Now, and again, I've been in this role for like 2 years now. I work with clients like Haleon and their work helping with their commercial strategy, as well as with Coca-Cola and a host of clients and lots of different brands. But what I've been noticing since George Floyd, and I wrote a piece about this, is I think we need more justice to shelf. And what does that mean? And this is a piece I wrote in Adweek. It really was around the desire to bring more of a representation for Black and brown brands to the shelf. And I think retail is one of those equal opportunity spaces, given that consumer demand drives the experience. I have experience in this space, I said 20 years, working with retailers, CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, Dollar General, name it. I've talked to them, whether at Kantar or just with industry conversations. And I have a passion for making change. I see myself as a change agent as I sort of pivot to more of a leadership role, for the industry and the thought leadership. I really believe from a category perspective, the future of category growth will be more multicultural, audience focused, meaning there's an economic opportunity associated to levelizing the playing field and creating more access for all. What do I mean by that, Joe? If you're going to go to the next slide, I think we heard a lot about, since George Floyd, there's been a lot of conversations and sort of commitments, but taking a step back from the altruistic and some of the corporate CSR goals, there's a commercial imperative here, right? I think when you think about, the conversation is geared towards folks who are suppliers and focusing on supplier diversity. I'm here to highlight that this is not just about feeling good about this stuff. There's a commercial imperative out there in the name of $4 trillion. So cultural movements affect companies and people and their products, and not turning them into means confronting the roadblocks and the blind spots. It's a mixed opportunity. So $4 trillion is up for grab if we think about the buying power of Black, Hispanic, Asian American, and Native American, and put that into perspective. That's the GDP of Australia, right? So if we just focus our attention not just on the demographic IRI, Nielsen sort of demographic approach, and really focus on what it means to unlock this growth, not with just sort of a one-size-fits-all approach or just putting a little cute baby on the package that has a little brown skin. I think that's one step, right? But we got to make sure we understand the same we approach, category understanding for foot care. We need to appreciate that same science with a cultural perspective. So I don't know, Joe, if you want to jump in there. I mean, that's sort of where we're headed in this conversation. What do you think about that?
No, I definitely agree. And like you said, it goes beyond products. It goes beyond products. But when we do buy products, a lot of times it's an emotional connection.
Yeah.
So, and when you're talking about culture and issues around different cultures, there's a big emotional connection there. So if you're able to tie the two together to the products, there's a great opportunity, and it's a way to really, really drive more desire for purchases.
Love it. Next slide, Joe. I appreciate that. The economics is driving the situation, and I believe because of that, my experience is anniversarying the same thing, same moments. You want to hit your number. If I'm talking to sales folks, if I'm talking to marketers, if I'm talking to retailers, I think we're all sort of attached to the routine of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, that's a narrow view of growth. I said $4 trillion in that first slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're still doing the same stuff, is that going to help us unlock that? And if we're targeting the same people the same way based on the same databases that we all buy from,
mm-hmm.
right? As well as we have to think differently in terms of where we're sourcing our information to. And then we've always been focusing on representation. And I think that's great. I mean, I want to be included in planning, but if my culture is not really, then what makes me and you connect, Joe, right? You're from Queens and I like your blue collar nature. And, I grew up poor. I mean, I can identify with working collar people that have to sort of, be resourceful to be successful, because to get to this level, hard work, dedication, and routine are keys to success, right?
Yep.
But if you don't understand what that sort of DNA is, you're not going to connect with a guy like me. You're not going to connect with a guy like you, regardless of what we look like. Mm-hmm. So I highlight that for all those blue collar people in the audience. It's really finding ways to unite us, not segregate us. That's the idea here.
Yep. Well, once they hear my voice and my New York accent, they immediately identify all of the blue collar people in New York.
Yeah. So that's the idea, right? That's where my experience has taken me. So I wrote a piece, I've observed the economics and the opportunity. And now I see that, because of my experience and tenure, I think we have a huge opportunity across retail to kind of prioritize this a little bit differently, is sort of how we approach. So if you go to the next slide, what do I mean by that? Is we need to have more growth audience category understanding. I think growth audiences are, originate from service experiences of retail. That's how I'm defining it. Mm-hmm. And I think once we understand, once we identify the demographic, whether it's income, race, sexual orientation, all these things are important. We can't stop there. I'm a Black father. I have a 5-year-old daughter named Olivia Owens. She's the pride of my life. And my behavior in shopping has transformed since she's now started kindergarten, right? Yep. The ability now for me to sort of multitask matters. So I wrote another piece because I like to write and, try to help people understand the world of different. And it's just really reinforcing the idea of fidelity and granularity around the consumer media and purchase preference. Gotta look deeper. We have to unlock and find those insights to get smarter and connect and convert more. And again, behaviors and touch points for Black father shoppers, not just Black shoppers. And again, if you cut this differently I'm from Boston, I'm sure a Black dad in California, in Texas, or in South Dakota is going to look a little bit different because the culture is different in those areas, right? And the needs are different, right? So I'm just kind of giving you the color around how category management needs to shift, especially when we think about how we're scorecarding success, whether it's from engagement or just, are we really gaining trust with the people that we're trying to reach? I know you deal with a lot of folks, suppliers. What do you think this is something that's important? What
definitely. And I think you bring up a really good point where here you wrote something about Black father shopping, but every time you add another piece, it becomes a completely different demographic. So it could be a Black father shopper, or maybe you're into wellness, right? Yeah. Or maybe you're into something, so now all of a sudden, if you're a Black father shopper who's into wellness, that's going to shape the products that you buy. So anytime you add another piece to it, and then again, you said from Boston. So maybe over there, it's going to be different than on the West Coast. So every time you add another element, it becomes a whole different cohort of people with different values, different needs, and that are going to be looking at different media, acting different ways across different channels. So very interesting point.
Yeah, so I'm just giving a pathway, right? I'm just showing folks the journey on how, obvious stuff, right? Don't just assume that you assume, let the data show you the way, but we have to keep challenging ourselves to sort of understand sort of that micro moment that matters most to the consumers we're targeting if we're really sort of measuring trust as well as engagement success. So next slide sort of highlights. So that was the opportunity. My experience will allow folks on the call listening as well as suppliers or stakeholders of retailer to appreciate that this isn't coming from an unfounded place, right? I like to put my money where my mouth is. I told you I'm from Boston. We show proof. We like to show evidence. The next slide kind of talks about what that means. Basically, I'm at VMLY&R now, which is one of the world's largest advertising agencies, media communications, part of WPP. And my commitment as part of this and being a leader here is, we're all motivated in this agency. We put DNA first, and we want to create a more equitable commerce ecosystem by helping remove any systematic differences or conditions in the distribution and or marketing of CPG, consumer packaged good products based on race, ethnicity, gender, economic status, or any other relevant characteristics. We believe in this, right? So this is sort of a mission. And one of the reasons I came to work at this company was that it's mission driven. I like that, right? Now I can be myself here. I'm able now to sort of bring all the best of my experience, both as a person of color, but also a student of retail who's objective in his understanding of what it takes to grow a category. So if you go to the next slide, with that mission comes experience. So when Target had their first Forward Founder program, I was asked to be a part of that, and VMLY&R supported me in that endeavor, and we were able to dedicate resources and time and provided a bunch of data as well as information to help these founders, the first class of founders, Black and Brown origin founders, to Target shelves. And since they've really taken on these incubator programs, you can see that their personal healthcare categories have truly transformed at a rate of 68% growth, I think, even in hair and skin alone. So what I'm highlighting is not only an interest passion space for me, it's an observation of what's actually happening at retail, right? George Floyd was a nice moment, but now the retailers who are really committed to change have really leaned in, and now it's part of their category growth plan. And I'm just thinking it's probably going to scale, especially if we think about why we've been having this conversation with you. Part of the nature of while we're talking to everybody is everyone needs resources and access so they can get smarter and stay ahead of the curve like everyone else does that usually listens to stuff we talk about, Joe. What are your thoughts in terms of these types of programs? Do you think they're scaling? How do you feel about ESRM's arrangement Supplier Diversity Week as it relates to this conversation? Thought?
Well, it's definitely scaling. I love seeing examples like this where they're actually walking the talk. They're getting behind them and they're actually helping them to grow. So they're giving them the opportunity and they're also giving them the resources and knowledge, which is not always easy to get. And especially if a lot of these are emerging brands, they don't have resources to begin with, regardless of whether they're diverse or not. So I think programs like this are great, and we're seeing a lot more of them across all of the different types of diverse-owned segments.
And it gets me excited because it's not just because I have a passion for seeing the small guy win or folks who don't have the same sort of roadmap to be successful. It's because access does prove results, right? When we give people tools to win, the right tools to win, talent always wins out in that equation. And I think that's important for people to understand. Target's not in the business just to give free, folks free shelf space. They believe in these brands, and now they're growing their category, and their guests are happier. So I was part of that. Our team was part of that. We did the data and the analytics around that, which is fueling the conversation we're having right now, where I feel like, we need to get smarter in terms of our category understanding, because all these folks represented categories that needed more understanding to be successful. Next slide. In that conversation, there was a small picture of Pernell Cesar, the CEO and founder of Black and Bold. Him and Rod Johnson I met them in that part, and as a result, I was able to partner with them as sort of hey, you guys need help. I leaned into no one in my agency. We didn't even do a press release about this. Mm-hmm. We just walked the talk, right? Myron King was one of our chief inclusion officers, was one of our champions here, and we were able to bring them into VMLY&R and help manage their paid search, their strategy, as well as give them sort of partnership ideas so they could be successful to win. Because they're a small Black-owned brand with a loyal following with a social impact purpose. So any B Corp organization out there, these guys are a really good benchmark for what that looks like. 5% of their profits go back to youth. They've done some really cool collaborations with Unilever, and their social footprint from the direct-to-consumer origins. So they're a really good example of the future of retail, where it's socially driven. These guys all come from Target, other places, classically market. They're same CPG type of experiences that we have. So there's a reason why they're successful. They know the equation of success from working at retail as well as with big brands, right? Shea Moisture.
Yep.
These guys know what they're doing, right? So I wanted to learn from them, because at the end of the day, if you're not an apprentice in this industry, you're not successful. So you got to learn the next thing, right? So the next slide here kind of shows that I believe in their mission, they believe in ours. Our strategists, Tracy Harper, LaMonica Madden, were involved, and they did a great job of kind of setting the brand position of community, local love of premium, and the small Black entrepreneurships were sort of the sweet spots. So we helped develop that strategy with the insights that we were able to get from social listening resources, and just sort of evaluating their own brand architecture with our own proprietary tools. So pretty cool story. And we activated pretty quickly. Again, these guys know what they're doing. We're just going to amplify, right? And they don't have the same buckets of money that maybe Coca-Cola does. So we have to be really resourceful with how we support them. And if you go to the next slide.
And I love that, because they get more scrappy. They when you're, there's a thing about the positive impact of having constraints, because it makes you think out of the box, and you kind of figure out new ways, and sometimes that leads to breaking new ground that other people will follow down the road because they just were forced to innovate.
Yep. So what we focused on was doing brand PR. Earned media is a real big lever of success, small, agile. So I'm like, well, if that's how they get their following, and given the fact that social is such a big component of their origin story, right? Their ability to bring followings that now allows them to scale it at a big box retailer through an incubation program, right? Those things allow them to be successful and to scale as fast as a big or mid-sized brand. So again, I'm building a story based on experience. So now I understand the levers that are necessary for a brand of this side with an awesome story to be successful. I wish we had the video. I don't think we have the video, but this
probably
is
not. Yeah.
This is an example of the video spot. This is Pernell. This is Rod, two handsome men, and this is them showing their process. We did video. We cut it for them. This was live on Instagram. We ran a brand lift study for them to understand sort of what worked, what didn't work. And this is really great. We helped not pro bono. We were able to figure out ways to co-invest. And one of the cool stories about this, we got a lot of hand holders at the agency that just volunteered their time.
That's awesome.
To be part of this, right? And their team is the most diverse group of folks you can imagine. It was allies involved, as well as Black and brown employees. So the content was created, and success came after that. Next slide. And then within that time period, they were able to get on Ellen. Again, part of that was their own brand of who they are and how. But we actually helped manage that whole process for them. And within that, one of the Amazon Prime days, they delivered some pretty great commercial results. So we feel proud about their success. I feel like I learned a lot from that, having the access to both Pernell as well as understanding what goes into a small brand and scaling. That case study is now fed into both the piece I wrote before, because I identified wow, if they didn't have this help, they wouldn't even be competitive right now. So it comes from a real place.
Yeah.
Next. So that's sort of that's what happened. And now the solution is the work that I've been doing since then, right? So why I'm talking to this community, why I'm talking to you, Joe, and I'm so happy for you and Wayne for approaching me about this opportunity, because you've been noticing my work in multicultural as well as on healthcare, right? Health and equity, as well as kind of closing the equity gap, are two passion areas of me, kind of who I am. So if you think about the solution that comes from that, it really starts. I apologize. The next slide. It's all good. It really starts with what a retail growth audience is. So since COVID, we've had a lot of time at home. We know there's been a lot of vaccines, as well as Black Lives Matters has pushed retail with the 50% pledge at shelf, meaning SKU in a product representation being 50% of the category to represent 15% of the population. These are all origins from service experiences. So if you think about COVID, has pushed U.S. retailers to re-identify, re-segment, and recreate audience activation plans. Not even and because of all these forces of brand experience changes, customer experience changes, commerce experience changes, have all impacted the path to purchase and the decision-making of retail. So now I am noticing that there's more service-based spending and experiences happening where you're now targeting the service audience in addition to the product, not as two separate, almost as two separate occasions, right? So I'm now proposing that we leverage culture to focus on new retail media audiences as a consideration of why they're doing that first, and then focusing on the conversion last, new pharmacy growth audiences and multicultural growth audiences, because these are all real audiences have now, again, these are examples. It could be any service. I'm just prioritizing the three levers that I'm doing most of my work on. So my offer within VMLY&R in terms of selling category leadership and intelligence and activation ideas revolves around this. So this is what I've been up to since all the work I've been doing the past year, and why I'm talking and excited about this. So if you're really focusing as a retailer on the culture first in your category, then you want to talk to me about multicultural growth audiences, because it's a different way to grow the category. Next slide. How does that work? Well, and I'm gonna let you talk in a minute, Joe, because you gave a really cool
this is the slide.
Yeah. Because the shopper path to purchase is no longer linear. This is from the Futures Company. Thank you, Jay Walker Smith, right? It's complex and it requires different attention. So this is just a decision tree of marketers in terms of how we have to create a playbook of investment that we show brands and we have to show retailers. There's a lot of choices we have to make. Now imagine if you're a small Black-owned brand, a woman-owned brand, LGBT plus brand, and you have a limited budget and you want to grow, right? So with all of this, you don't have the same abilities as a Haleon to scale with the least amount of investment possible, because product and availability and shrink are all still fundamentals of success in big box retail. So my job is to make it where you want to place those bets. So here's sort of the approach on but before I do that, talk about what you mean, like your experience.
Sure.
And
it's funny because the path to purchase, it's like a bush, it's like it comes in so many different directions. So I know a lot of people that follow me on LinkedIn know that I'm into this thing that's called rucking, right? It's you put a backpack on that has a weight plate in it, and then you walk for several miles. So, but the way I found out about it and the way my friends got into it is kind of a perfect example of this. It's I learned about it I listened to a lot of health and wellness podcasts, and I heard there was one author of a book called Comfort Crisis, and he was talking about rucking and this company called Go Ruck and the benefits of it, right? It's good if you don't like jogging or you don't like weightlifting. It's kind of both at the same time, right? It gives you the weight and it gives you the cardio at the same by just walking with the weights. So I found out about it through the podcast and then through reading the book and then actually interviewing the author. And so I got into it and I started really loving it, posting pictures on social media, talking about it. So I've had several friends that ended up getting into it either because of my posts on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, or because of my word of mouth, or directly talking to them. So I made the purchase from the influence of podcasts and the author. My friends made purchases from the influence of either me directly or my posts, and then
Love it.
checking it out themselves.
Nailed it.
So many different ways, but all centered around this one company, which happens to be a veteran-owned brand as well, which I was very happy to support.
Thanks, Joe. Next slide. That's a great example of inspiration, consideration can come anywhere. So my big point here is culture isn't being prioritized enough during category level retail planning. That is the big point here. So I just showed you the complexity. I showed you the commercial imperative. I even give you a little experience I've had working with a brand that is scaling and growing categories at places like Target, Albertsons, and so forth. But what I'm noticing is the struggle is the consumers. What makes a Black and Bold so successful as they're trying to invest, they know culture.
Mm-hmm.
So with that equation set, they're able to scale faster because they know who they are. They say no when they need to say no. They're choiceful in their decisions because their integrity matters more than sort of who they're trying to reach in some ways, right? Because they how they grow matters. So if we're able to prioritize the culture, the earned attention that comes from that is a profitability and almost a non-promo plan to kind of use sort of sales terms. So I think if we start to prioritize category at a category level, it'll allow the investment the brand makes to make help them both from an equity building standpoint, but also help the retailer achieve a bigger goal, which is a differentiated experience. So I believe in that, right? So everyone spends millions and millions of dollars on planogram changes, but if the products on your shelf represent the culture of the people in the community, you don't need to do much on POP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Next slide.
No, and I love this point, and I actually wrote an article about this. Not dealing with supply diversity, but it was dealing with vitamins and supplements. And the article was about, are you speaking your consumer's language, right? If someone who's into health and wellness, I'm listening to certain podcasts, I'm reading certain authors, I'm reading certain blogs. Are you able to talk to me the way these people are talking to me, and the words they're using and what's important, and if you can, just like you said, you won't need the POP. You're already living that language. So
love it. And then I think this goes into some work. I'm doing a snapshot of some work. I did evaluating, call it the sports drink category for one of our larger clients. And what we learned is when we did this work, to give you a sample, the type of analysis we're doing, it's really modern commerce is a combination of science and art, right? We know that there's a growth opportunity. Walmart has a unique opportunity with young Hispanic sports drinkers. So that was the brief, that was a remit. And here are the 3 ways we were able to identify the opportunity in a sample way, right? There's a lot more that goes into this and whatnot, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the analysis that we're doing. And I think for your suppliers out there, this is a new way for you to evaluate, and all the retailers are looking for new ways to sort of scorecard success. Hopefully this resonates. So if you go to the next slide, it starts really what's needed is we have to ensure culture is represented across the whole journey, right? It's not something we just bolt on at the end with a picture or like a sports reference like the Eagles or whatever to make somebody connect. Although those things do work, culture really embodies what we are about and what the brand's about and how it really connects to the community. You don't need to work hard to do that. And what did I mean by that? So the first thing we did in our analysis, next slide, Joe, was to uncover culture in a way where we're starting here first. Most people start with the size of prize. Most people start with, some financial exercise. No, we're going to do attitudinal because we want to really focus on what moment, what type of, where in the culture we want to be, who we want to be. So we really highlighted these attributes of where we're trying, like what we know this type of drinker is in these environments and what we want to do differently. So if you go to the next slide, right, these are all the things that we describe. The second thing is, what's needed. How do we reach the right audience for the relevant moments that matters? It's a 3-step process of how we sort of uncover the solution. The next slide that comes with that example of what that looks like is, Here's what that looks like at Walmart. Again, focusing on the retail category, based on the attitudes, we now understand the platforms. Now we understand, okay, let's do our research on what does that look like in terms of an opportunity. And then we provide a pathway in terms of crawl, walk, run, in terms of how to connect. The social commerce, influencers, social selling, all social. Because we know that this shopper is really over indexes on social commerce. So there's the insight from the size of prize, which drives the opportunity, which is last, right? We know where we want to go, how we're going to reach them, and now we can quantify with the IRI. Next slide. We can now connect to the commerce occasion, which helps drive our size of prize. If you go to the next slide, right? Based off of this size of prize of $2.6 million in the category, we know within the Walmart Hispanic category opportunity where exactly we want to launch, right? Whether it's social, delivery, pickup. These bubbles are my companies, and this is Ethan Pratt, if he's listening. He created these things called Signal, which creates this is why I love working here. I used to just think about in-store and online. Now this is the whole ecosystem with retail media. This is a commerce ecosystem where you can create engagement opportunities. So anyone's interested in understand what that looks like, we can help you benchmark yourselves against that. So this is part of the action plan that comes from what I just shared, right? We know what they want, what the culture is. We then create the culture for the retailer, and then we go after the size of price based on the tactics that then fuels the right number that we need to go after, right? So this just gives you a quick snapshot of the work I can help and our team can help any multicultural focused supplier or retailer win, whether it's Walmart, anywhere, Walgreens, anywhere. So and that kind of leads me to the last slide, and then we can, if you want more, that we need more, right? So this is just 3 phases of support we can provide, but I'm telling you, the discipline that you invest for above the line, everybody needs to be repurposed to hyper targeting at a category level to drive conversion. And in essence, you'll get more earned media attention from that. It's the belief. So we can help you unlock more growth with understanding audience sentiment, brand equity as it relates to this, demonstrating growth from connected commerce as it relates to this, as well as benchmarking impact against other D&I goals that you might have as an organization. So lots of ways of support that come off the back of the intelligence and obviously experience that we have. And Joe, thanks for the opportunity, my friend. I really appreciate it. I mean, I'm hoping this resonates with the folks listening. I know it does with you, and I look forward to doing more conversations around multicultural, pharmacy, retail, all these things I love, man. So hopefully make a difference today, and we're both change agents for the cause.
No, thank you. This is great stuff, and it has a lot of applications, even beyond multicultural. You could dig into all different groups or segments and apply this. So really exciting stuff. And thanks again, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Awesome.